Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta. It is Friday night, September the 10th, and I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. It's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open. If anybody would like to sit in there and wants to hang out, that's great. I want to continue looking at neglect, the issues surrounding neglect from a PDF that I found from the Child Welfare Information Gateway. We've been looking at this for probably almost 2 weeks now. It's a great PDF. It's 112 pages long. And we're only on page 45. But, I don't think we'll cover the whole thing. We could spend months talking about that. But I just wanted to touch on the basics of neglect and take a look at what neglect is considered to be, what happens to children who have been neglected, ways to prevent neglect, how parents can get help and caregivers and what to look out for, signs and symptoms of neglect, all the important stuff that, the public needs to be aware of and that I need to be aware of. So I'm just happy to be able to take a look at this with everybody and talk about neglect and child abuse and neglect. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk shows. I'm a child rights advocate. I stand up for children's rights. I fight against child abuse, and the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and which is a volunteer position, which I love doing and happy to be a part of. And so thanks, everybody, for tuning into all my shows. I don't know, I've done about over 350 shows, and I have like almost 11,000 shows listened to, and somebody's listening, and I do appreciate it. I thank you so much for tuning in day and day out to listen to me ramble on about, how we need to stop child abuse, right? And as a survivor, my morning shows, one child abuse survivor to another, talking about the issues that surround adult survivor issues, that we all have to go through after living, through abuse during our childhoods, right? So thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and I really appreciate it, and I do appreciate the support. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and ultimately I'm all about stopping and preventing child abuse and also protecting children, right? That's what I do. So, that's what I'm all about, promoting awareness, education, and prevention of child abuse and to help protect children. So I just ask that people under the age of 18 have permission to listen to my shows. Have an adult listen to the show with you, whether it's a parent or someone who cares about you, a counselor at school, a teacher, someone who you trust and has a good head on their shoulders that could listen to the shows with you, maybe on archive. And then just to let you know, to see if it should be something that you should be listening to, because I don't know how young the people are that are listening to my shows, and I don't know where the blog talk players are placed around on different websites. Who knows? So that's why I say this on every show, because I believe that we need to stand up and protect children, try to help save their lives. They need all the help they can get in that area. Children really have no voice and no rights unless we stand up for them, right? Who's going to listen to a child? Most people don't. So that's why, as adults, we need to be these voices for these children out here, to stand up for them and to protect them and do all we can, right, to help save their lives and to help keep them safe and free from abuse and free from harm, right? And I have a good friend in the chat room. Hello, Storm Chaser, and glad that you could be here. That's just awesome. I want to take another look at neglect, and I'll just give you the link again. It's www.childwelfare.gov/pubs, PUBS, /user manuals /neglect /neglect.pdf. That's where I found this information, and it's really good information. And I'll give you I have to give you the actual name of the actual PDF, this document that they've put out on the Child Welfare Information Gateway. It's called Child Abuse and Neglect User Manual Series. That's what it's from, a series, right? And it's called Child Neglect, a Guide for Prevention, Assessment, and Intervention, right? And it was put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau, and Office on Child Abuse and Neglect. So that's who put this out. Great information. It's just very inclusive. It just includes everything in here. And it was put out by Diane DePanfilis, Diane, DePanfilis, in 2006. And so it's actually not all that old. Some of the stuff that we see out there is from like 1994, 1987, 2006 is actually not all that bad for information to come out from studies and whatnot that are being done. They, generally follow a couple of years after they're being done, and so it's not too old. So I like looking at this article. There's lots of good info here. So I want to continue talking about, we were looking at risk and protective measures And page 45 of this PDF is where we're at. And this is quite an interesting section here that we're going to be looking at here tonight. This neglect, the issues that surround neglect. Neglect is actually the most common form of child abuse. That's what we hear as far as the studies go. And neglect is considered to be child abuse. Quite often, as an advocate, standing up saying stop child abuse, right? We don't throw in neglect. We don't say stop child abuse and neglect, because it's just like and neglect, right? The whole issue is that neglect is really part of it is considered to be child abuse, and it is against the law, and it needs to be stopped. It is the most common form of child abuse, actually, but it's not considered to be the most life-threatening, so that's why most people who fight for children's rights are concentrating on the whole issues surrounding physical abuse as well as child sexual abuse, because those are the two that seem to be most life-threatening to a child. But actually, neglect is just as serious, and all of it's just as serious. It doesn't matter what kind of abuse it is, whether it's physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual, or spiritual, or neglect. All abuse hurts. And no child deserves to have to live through this. And no child deserves to lose their lives at the hands of a parent or caregiver or child sexual predator who is doing this stuff to them. Child abuse kills. And if it doesn't kill a child physically, it will kill them spiritually and emotionally and in every other way, right? So this is the thing. Child abuse is a killer. It's killing our children. And who's doing it? Parents, aunts and uncles, grandparents, cousins, older, distant relatives, child sexual predators, just crazy people getting a hold of children. But mainly it's parents and caregivers. 90 to 95% of abuse happens within the home and is usually perpetrated by someone who the child knows. So this is a fact. They've done the studies and they know the truth. For all the reported child abuse cases out there, this is the facts, right? Now we know there's a whole lot of abuse that is not reported. It's underreported, actually. And so we don't, those cases we just don't know about because they are there, but it's just that they're not reported. But all the studies that they've done on all the cases that, have been reported, this is what they have found, that 90 to 95% of child abuse and neglect occurs within the home. And it is being perpetrated by either the parents, the caregivers, a relative, a close family friend, someone the child knows and trusts. Could be a sibling, could be a cousin, it's generally a family member, and it's generally someone the child trusts. So this is sad, this is a fact, and this is why we're talking about this, right? The other 5 to 10% is a child sexual predator or someone that gets a hold of the child outside of the home, whether it's a daycare worker or, somewhere where the child is. Because really, people, we got to face the facts. Abuse happens wherever the child is. So child abuse, right, is the abuse of children, and child abuse occurs wherever the child is. If the child was not there, then there would be no abuse towards them because the child was not there. This is not rocket science, man. Wherever the children are, that's where they're being abused. Children are most likely often at home or at some sort of a daycare facility or someone's home being looked after by another person. So that's why it's so important for people to realize this is very preventable. This is all preventable because child abuse is anything that intentionally harms a child. This is not something like an accident. We're talking this is intentionally injuries and harm to a child. Anything that harms a child intentionally is considered to be abuse. And so this is happening in our homes. If we could stop the child abuse that's going on in the homes, then we'd only have to deal with 5 to 10% out there in the world. But unfortunately, 90 to 95% is happening within our homes. And so many people like to bury their heads in the sand and just pretend that it's not happening or, for many psychological reasons. I understand it because I'm a survivor. But the whole issue is that we have to come up with the programs, and we're going to have to be the generation that stands up and says, you know what? We're not going to leave this up to another generation. We're going to do this right now, right here, right now. How many years do we have? Okay, let's get busy. Let's get started. Because children are dying, and they're going to die tonight, they're going to die tomorrow, and if they don't die, they're going to be in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries. They're going to be either murdered or killed by their parents, or end up in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries, and if they're not in the hospital, it's because they're laying at home in their crib half dead, or somewhere in the bedroom floor underneath the bed half dead, or, possibly on the backyard buried, because parents do sort of things, these types of things, right? So this is the whole issue, right? We have to be the voice for these children. And that's why I'm doing these shows. So thanks, everybody, for being here. We're going to sort of pick up off where we left off, page 45 of this PDF, and this section is I want to talk about child factors. We were talking about parental factors, but now I want to talk about child factors. This is the next portion, right? And I'm just reading right from this PDF, and I'm adding my own stuff in there, my own opinions, and also my own experiences and things like this, and what I've known and experienced in my lifetime regarding the whole issues of child abuse and neglect. So I do quite often throw things in there, and they are my opinion. And but otherwise, I'm reading right from the page, and you can go there, pull it up, and read with me, right? So child factors, they say any child can be the victim of neglect, but some characteristics appear to be more highly represented among maltreated children, including being under the age of 3, having certain behavioral problems, and having special needs. So they talk about age as being one of the child factors. Temperament and behavior is another one. And what else do they talk about? Oh, special needs. So we're going to take a look at those. So age, it says in 2004, children from birth to age 3 had the highest rate of reported maltreatment. So from birth to age 3 had the highest rate of reported maltreatment. That's so sad. Little tiny babies and toddlers, right? Research also shows that children under the age of 3 are most at risk for neglect, with rates decreasing as the age of the child increases. So it's kind of like the younger the child, the more at risk they are for neglect, right? And that's very sad because these little children, they're relying on their parents and caregivers, whoever these people are, to look after them and to meet their needs, right? And these little babies, they're helpless, and little toddlers and whatnot, they don't, they're just totally, completely dependent upon their caregivers, being able to provide for them, whether it's, their physical needs, their emotional needs, their health, and physical well-being, right? Just the whole thing. So very, very sad. And I just have a comment from the chat room that I need to put the link in there. You bet. I'll pop the link in there right now so you can read along with me. It's really good info here. Let me see. I'm just going to pop this link in here, and I'll give you the link again too. And that is www.childwelfare.gov/pubs /user manuals /neglect/neglect.pdf. And that's the link. And it's an extensive 112 pages long, this PDF, but it's a great document. And so they said here, temperament and behavior. A child's temperament and behavior may be associated with child neglect. Children with an irritable temperament and who have difficulty being soothed may be more at risk for being neglected than other children, since having a difficult temperament may strain the parent-child relationship. One study found that a difficult child temperament, as perceived by the mother, was specifically associated with emotional neglect. And neglected children also often demonstrate a distinct set of behaviors, including being passive, non-assertive, or withdrawn. So it is unclear whether children develop these behavior problems because they are neglected, or if they are neglected because they have behavioral problems. So that's the thing, right? They don't know if the child already had these problems before they were neglected, or if they developed them after, right? So that's the thing. But it's just either way the child is suffering, and it's literally up to the parents as far as I'm concerned. I'm throwing this in here. That parents should learn how to handle the situation. If a parent has a child who has a difficult child temperament, like they're talking here, just hard, they can't appease them, and the little toddler or the baby just cannot be comforted, and they just seem to have problems, then there's something wrong. And the parents, it's up to them to get some help instead of lashing out at their child. But quite often people, I know because I grew up in a home like that where my parents did not understand the whole issue around getting help. They just figured, oh, well, it's up to us, we don't know a thing, so we're just going to continue to treat our children the way we do, without realizing that they could get help, even though they were told to go to court-ordered counseling and that they needed help, the family needed counseling, the children were going to need counseling separately, and my parents were going to need marital counseling. They were told this by the courts, and they still did not go get help. So it's clearly the choice of the parent. It's actually the inability to make the right choice for their children is what it is. And so if parents have a child who is, has a difficult temperament, and they're just hard to appease, right, and to comfort, or to get them to relax or calm down, it's up to the parent to get some help for that child and for themselves to learn how to deal with that child properly and not lash out and not abuse that child or neglect that child. Abuse is a choice. The abusers choose to do what they're doing. They choose to inflict their own abusive behavior towards a child, and it's not ever the child's fault. It is always the parent's fault, because the parents have the ability to go out and get the help. But if they do not know enough to do so, which is quite often the case, then the child suffers, right? And then parents are brought up on charges all because they were too really ignorant. It's ignorant. There's nothing wrong with saying that word. It's just a lack of education. Just did not go get help without realizing that there's all this help out there. And especially today with the internet, there is so much help out there. There's help for parents around every kind of topic you can think of. There's information out there for parents who are struggling, And it's like, get involved. Get into a parental group that talks about these issues with children, And if you're having a hard time and you're just thinking, man, I don't want to lash out on my child, but I'm so stressed. How am I going to deal with this? Get online. Put yourself out for a few minutes, you know what I mean? Take a deep breath. Take a 15-minute breather. Go get online somewhere and find a group for parents who need support. Because parents do need support. You bet they do. But so do children, and children need love and care and affection, not being neglected and misused and mistreated and abused, right? So it's up to the parents to get that help. The child can't go get help. The 2-year-old can't go make the phone call and say, hello, my parents are having a little bit of difficulty here, and I'm just not the most happy child. So, it's up to the parents. Now, come on, everybody needs to take accountability. Like, parents so often don't want to take that accountability, and they don't want to take the responsibility for their behavior and for what they're doing. Quite often we see this. So this is the thing. It is the parents' responsibility to get some help. And, if more people knew the kind of help that was available out there, they probably would go get it. It's just that so many people do not know. And this is the sad part, because the children suffer it. So it says, neglected children also often demonstrate a distinct set of behaviors, including being passive, non-assertive, or withdrawn. Okay, we already read that. So it says here, when considering a relationship between behavior problems and neglect, a CPS worker should assess whether the neglected child actually has some more behavior problems, or if the neglectful parent merely believes that the child has more behavior problems. See, that's the whole issue with this whole thing regarding child abuse, right? So many times CPS, DHS gets involved. They don't really do their homework, and the parents, make out that the children are just so difficult. Well, in that case, then the CPS or DHS workers, whoever they are, these people that are stepping in on behalf of the child to intervene, should just say, well, since we don't know, because we aren't here to witness your child's behavior, like you're saying your child is difficult and blah, 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 then that means that you all have to go for counseling or your child will be removed. And just too bad for the parents, because no child should have to suffer because of a neglectful or abusive parent. And I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel. I don't think children should. That's why we're doing this. That's why I'm doing this. And that's why there's tens of thousands of advocates and people, there's people like you and me, who are standing up to say, no, it's not right to abuse a child or neglect a child. It's not right. No child deserves that. And I don't care how bad their temperament or behavior is. They do not deserve that. So, it's just too bad for everybody that thinks it's okay to abuse their children, because it's not. It's against the law, just in case everybody just doesn't know that. I always throw that in on my shows, because child abuse is against the law, thank God, and so is neglect, right? So it says here, behavior problems can be categorized as either internalizing or externalizing. And internalizing behavior is a behavior or a feeling that is directed inward, such as depression. And such children may be overlooked because they rarely act out. Externalizing behavior is characterized by outward expression of behaviors and feelings that are easily observable, such as being aggressive. So these children often receive more attention than those who internalize, because their behavior is often disruptive to others. So it's more noticeable, right? And then they talk about special needs. And that's the next section here. And, thank you, Storm. I appreciate that. Storm Chaser says, frankly, some of them would rather get a beer. Yeah, those parents wonder why. They're in denial, right? Some of them would rather just go get a beer. Well, you got that right. And that's the sad part. And so many people, I've talked to so many people, over the last few years especially, that have thrown these ridiculous comments in, like, well, I was hit and beat on and kicked as a child, and I'm fine. And it's like, well, okay, what kind of a sadomasochist are you? Because I was hit and beat on and kicked around too, and I sure didn't appreciate it. And my body tells me that today. You know what I mean? I suffer with chronic pain, and I've been living with chronic pain my whole life. And, you know, I'd sure like, you know, somebody to tell me that it was perfectly okay for someone to slam my head into a wall, you know, or beat me with heavy objects, you know. It hurts, let me tell you, and you do pay for it later in life. These children, you know, they, you know, and as far as neglect goes, you bet. Neglect is a huge problem. And, you know, I mean, we're not here to talk about my story tonight, but the whole issue is that you're just so right. So many people just don't care, and they would rather just go get a beer or just, you know, just ignore the whole thing and just say, well, it's okay. There was nothing wrong with child abuse. Well, you know what? I got news for you, buddies out there, people who believe that. Child abuse is against the law, and I am one of these people who's standing up saying, you know what? It's against the law, and therefore, too bad. I don't care. There's laws protecting children, and I'm going to fight to support them all I can, right? So special needs, it says, while the link between children with special needs and neglect is unclear, some studies have found higher rates of child abuse and neglect among children with disabilities. And this is sad. This is so sad, but we see this out here, right? I mean, this is what I do. I study this stuff, right? I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, like I said before. And this is what we do. I study when I'm not working, which I do have to work to support myself. I'm studying, so I'm always looking at what's going on out there. And it's very, very sad to see this stuff going on, you know, regarding abuse and children with disabilities. They are really our most vulnerable group out there, really, people with disabilities, and especially children with disabilities, because quite often, who's looking out for them? Who's looking in on them? And it's so, you know, it's so difficult to prove it because they possibly can't speak, or they maybe not be able to communicate, right? And so how are they going to, you know, you might have an older child who has special needs or disabilities, and because of that situation, they cannot speak out and they can't say what's happening to them. And so really we have to look out for these kids. And, you know, I'm so thankful for anybody who's doing anything to look out for children with disabilities, because they do need our protection. They need every single bit of it. And they need our voices to stand up for them. It says, another study, however, failed to find increased level of maltreatment, just scrolling down here, among a sample of children with moderate to severe retardation, right? It says children with special needs, such as those with physical or developmental challenges, may be more at risk for maltreatment because, and they list it off here, their parents become overwhelmed with trying to take care of them and may respond with irritability, inconsistent care, or punitive discipline. And children may be unresponsive or have limited ability to respond, interact, or show as much affection as the parents expect, thereby disrupting the parent-child attachments. And society tends to devalue individuals with disabilities, and that's truth, man. Society, you know, tends to devalue children, period. And society tends to devalue individuals with disabilities, or anyone who has any kind of issues or problems of any sort. Right, because everybody thinks everybody's just supposed to be perfect, and, you know, there's just no such thing on this planet, let me tell you that. It says, an alternate explanation for higher rates of maltreatment among children with special needs is that parents of children with special needs have more frequent contact with an array of professionals and thus may be under greater scrutiny. So that could be a thing, right, because they're being kind of looked in on. They sort of catch the abuse. Well, it's a good thing, and they need to, because there's just been so many horrific cases regarding people and children and men and women, adults, who have mental, you know, developmental problems, right? And they used to be in insane asylums, you know, and when they really could have functioned pretty well out in the real world with a little bit of help, right? So I used to work for a group that used to be called the Association for Retarded Citizens. Now, they don't call it that anymore. I think they call it the Associations for People with Mental Disabilities or something like that, right? They did change the name. But this was years and years and years ago, but I did that job for 10 years, and I actually got to go and meet some of these people that we used to build these group homes for, And I got to meet some of the clients who would use these group homes and got to live in these semi-care apartments, and they were so happy to have their own space with their pictures on the wall, and they would invite us in, and they'd want us to see their place, and they were so happy. And it just made me feel really good, because I know that years before that they would have been just stuck in an asylum somewhere and tortured and beaten on, and we saw the pictures of all those asylums and insane asylums and whatnot for those people back in the old days. I looked into that because I was doing that for 10 years. And so, it's so good to see people that are out there, taking care of these people and doing the work that they do. They certainly need our help, right? So important. So it says, in any case, these parents may need more support and encouragement to help them provide for the needs of their children. For children with special needs, having a strong and secure attachment to their primary caregivers in turn may moderate the negative effects of the disability and provide protection from neglect. So I'm going to scroll back up here, because there's this one section that says internalized and externalized behavior problems. And this is what they were talking about, internalized, where, the child actually sort of goes within themselves or, and becomes very passive. Or there's externalized behavior problems where the child might be very aggressive and acting out, right? And so I want to look at these because they actually talk about them. Children can exhibit difficulties or problems resulting from maltreatment in a variety of ways, including their behavior. So it says children may focus their negative feelings internally or externally, and maltreatment may cause internalized behaviors such as, and they say may because, they always say doesn't necessarily always cause this stuff, but sometimes it does. And so, it's not a 100% thing. But they know they've done enough studies to know that it can cause this type of stuff, right? And they listed off here: agitation, nightmares, avoidance of certain activities or people, difficulty falling asleep or staying awake, or falling asleep or staying asleep, sleeping too much, difficulty concentrating, hypervigilance, irritability, becoming easily fatigued, poor appetite or overeating, low self-esteem, feelings of hopelessness. So it says the above symptoms, if experienced persistently, or if many of them are experienced all or at once, should be cause for concern. Maltreatment also may cause externalized behaviors, including difficulty paying attention, not listening when spoken to, difficulty organizing tasks and activities, being easily distracted, being forgetful, bedwetting, excessive talking, difficulty awaiting their turn, bullying or threatening others, being physically cruel to people or animals, playing with or starting fires. This is just some of the stuff they're listing here. Stealing and destroying property. And so it says here, it is important to keep the child's age and developmental level in mind when assessing a child for these symptoms. For example, bedwetting by a 13-year-old would cause more concern than bedwetting by a 2-year-old. And if a child's internalized or externalized behaviors interfere with his normal or her normal functioning, or if their behavior changes dramatically, then the child should be referred for further assessment. So this is the thing, right? All of these things, or some of them together, there's a problem, right? If a child's just always, going within themselves and anxious, agitated, not sleeping well, not concentrating, irritable, tired all the time, overeating or not eating at all, low self-esteem, there's something going on with that child, right? And this is the thing. Or if they're not listening when they're spoken to and they just can't organize anything and easily distracted, being forgetful. We're talking to an excess, difficulty waiting their turn, bullying or threatening others is a big one. I was abused as a child, so when I was a little girl, I was actually the bully. And I learned how to do that from my mom. My mom showed me how to be a bully and how to threaten and hurt people. And so I was good at it for many years until, I started to realize it was wrong. But when I was a little kid, I'd just push other little kids around and push people down, and I was the aggressive one, you know what I mean? And that's because my mom showed me how to behave like that. Well, both my parents did, actually. So I didn't go within myself. I was actually very aggressive as a child, right? So, it's hard on children. It absolutely is. We have about a minute left, and I think we'll continue on with the rest of this next week, and then I think we'll finish it up, and we'll talk about something else. But this is just so good to take a look at, the whole issue surrounding neglect. They have assessment of child neglect. That's next. And we might just go through some of this here, and we'll continue on. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. I'll be on the weekend. You can check my show page, and then I'll be back on Next week, Monday morning, one child abuse survivor to another, and then the rest of the week, right? So take care, everybody. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to talking to you and seeing you around on Facebook and wherever. Get a hold of me if you need anything, and or if I can, help you find some resources or information or whatever. And check out our website at Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, http://dreamcatchersforAbusedChildren.com. Learn the facts, learn the signs and symptoms. Take a look around at the children in your own life. Make sure that they're not being abused or neglected, right? And then do the right thing if they are, and get that child some help, right? That's just, we have to do this. We have to make sure that the children in our own lives are not being abused, right? So get the information, learn the signs and symptoms, and protect your children and all the children around you, right? Have a great night, everybody. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.